All right, what is going on, everyone? End of week 4 from live inside the Levi Stadium press box. And as you can see right behind me, at least moments ago, it was a 49ers victory right here over the New England Patriots, 30-13. And Evan Giddings rolling with you on a new edition, a live edition of Believe in 49ers presented by the Believe Podcast Network, as well as betonline.ag. Again, my name is Evan Giddings. You can follow me on social media, on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok, at Evan A. Giddings. And also a reminder that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds to spread bets on during the games. I hope you were on 49ers minus 10.5 like I was. A little bit of a sweat there down the stretch, but the Niners locked it in, and in my opinion, had the lock of the week in their favor. The largest betting line of any game in the NFL season thus far, and the 49ers covered. So if you were on BetOnline, you cashed in. And if you think you know your stuff in the future, get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of the over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. So again, shout out to our YouTube audience, everybody filing in for this live taping of Believe in 49ers after the 49ers week 4 victory, 30-13 against the New England Patriots. The Niners move back to 500. The New England Patriots fall to 1-3. But first and foremost, this was, I don't even want to call it a get-right game for the 49ers. Earlier today on 95.7 The Game, during our pregame coverage on the kickoff show, I was discussing how last week was the get-right game for the 49ers. Last week was the game against the Los Angeles Rams that the Niners should have gotten right, but they weren't able to do it. And so this game was a better get-it game. It was a better have-it game, and the Niners did eventually bury a beatable opponent. There's a lot to kind of go through, so I just want to mark the things that stood out to me the most, and then we can dig into them individually. First and foremost, the defense, though it got banged up a little bit, and we can get into some of those injuries in a moment, I thought it stood tall today. Easily its best performance of the season. You look at the New England Patriots and what they did for the majority of the contest. If you erase the final drive, in which included a 50-yard bomb by the New England Patriots, the Patriots offense today averaged just over 2.5 yards per play. That mark would have been the number one mark of any defense in the Kyle Shanahan era. So I thought that they had an opponent's offense that was one that you could absolutely take advantage of. They held Ramondre Stevenson to just 43 yards on the ground, 3.5 yards per pop. They also forced a fumble early in the game, and they really didn't allow Jacoby Brissett, a quarterback that is not going to beat you all too often. They didn't allow him to do anything special in his football game. So defensively, the Niners had an inferior opponent, and I thought they made them look like it, which also included 6 sacks. Kevin Giddings, who had just 3.5 sacks throughout his entire career, had 2.5 today, all in the first half. Nick Bosa gets a strip sack essentially to end the game and preserve yours truly's Niners minus 10.5 bet. And just overall defensively, they looked fantastic. They had a couple of turnovers, including a pick 6 in the first half by the president himself, Mr. Fred Warner. He ended up leaving the game before the half, did not return with an ankle injury, but I was just down to the locker room. He appears to be fine. He's in good spirits. It was one of those things that he just didn't want to push, didn't want to test, especially with everything in front of the 49ers as they stand now at 2-2. So the defense absolutely gets a game ball as a whole today. And then the third biggest takeaway from this game was the offense, and especially just the aerial assault that Brock Purdy put on New England. And this pass defense was one that we knew coming in could be taken advantage of. It's been 3 weeks, but they've been one of the worst groups in football. And listening to Kyle Shanahan after the game, along with Brock Purdy, this was a game that demanded the Niners to move the ball down the field. And I hate to break it to you, anybody that's in the Brock Purdy can't throw the ball deep crowd needs to get off of that bandwagon, needs to get off of that train and get onto the train of this quarterback can make any throw that's in front of him if he needs to. Though he was 15 for 27, 288, a touchdown and a pick, he dialed the ball up deep about more than I think he ever has before because he needed to. Kyle Shanahan described the Patriots defense as playing primarily quarters coverage, and those 2 high safeties were playing a little tight, playing a little more down towards the box. That meant that Purdy had the deep ball available to him. And what did he do? A 45-yard dime to Juwan Giddings, a 53-yard connection to Deebo Samuel, a 38-yard crossing route across the middle, a deep crosser to Brandon Ayuk. He hit multiple deep balls in this game, even a 24-yard pitch and catch to Jordan Mason. There was a lot of balls moving down the field from Brock Purdy, and that's something that a lot of people have kind of thrown in Brock's way. Well, is he someone that can deliver the ball when he needs to downfield? Is he one that can drive the defense and take the top off? The answer is clearly yes, and I understand it's the New England Patriots. I understand it's only week 4, but Brock Purdy continues to demonstrate that when the throw needs to go to a certain place, he's willing to put it there, and he takes calculated risks. I mean, it's evident by the one touchdown that he threw in this game. It's also evident by the one interception that he threw in this game, because early in the first half, there was a play, and 3.5 minutes left, right before the half. He's got an opening in the back corner of the end zone to George Kittle. I thought on that play, Deebo Samuel actually underneath was more open, could have got them the first down and set them up for a touchdown, but Brock Purdy went for it all. He put it up, basically a jump ball in the back left corner of the end zone, and George Kittle went up over 3 Patriots, got it, stayed in bounds, and secured the touchdown. So great to see George Kittle back and healthy. Also great to see Brock Purdy putting the ball into the trust of his teammates. And then that was the good part. Now, later on in the game, of course, he threw an interception trying to get in actually that same corner of the end zone, the ball to Brandon Ayuk, in which he just simply didn't see the second defender. He took credit for that at the podium, said he just misidentified where the ball was supposed to go and wanted to give his guy a chance to make a play. Also said he got greedy a little bit. But this is where Brock Purdy, to me, is also one of the more cerebral players in this league. He understands calculated risk and has appropriate fear for situations. At the time, the 49ers were up by 17 points. That's a time where you can get greedy, where you can make a play that might end up turning the ball over and costing your team a possession, because you're playing with 3 scores. Earlier in the game to George Kittle, also a time in that football game where they're up by 13 points in the first half. The defense has not allowed anything, only gave up 3 points in the first half because Joey Sly hit a 63-yard field goal at the tail end of the first half. Brock Purdy knows that he can put the ball potentially into harm's way and let his playmakers go get it. I think that's where a great quarterback is able to separate himself with who he trusts, when he trusts that player, and why he trusts that player. So the calculated risk was also on display early and often today from Brock Purdy, and that's why you're seeing him post a mark in which he averaged almost 12 yards per attempt in this football game, less than 300 yards, but only on 27 attempts. So he was throwing the ball deep down the field. He was taking advantage of a secondary that's not one of a great one in this football league. And I thought Brock Purdy demonstrated today that he can and will throw the ball deep. The other thing that kind of stood out to me, and maybe somewhat of a consequential or negative manner, is the fact that this was another performance by the special teams that had a big mistake. That is now 4 consecutive weeks for the 49ers that they have either had a turnover, a punt blocked, a fake kick, or a missed field goal happen 4 straight weeks now. In this case, it was Isaac Guerendo, a rookie, coming right out of the half, that fumbled the football on the opening kickoff. The Patriots went down and scored. That's a case where special teams hurt the 49ers once more. Didn't hurt them in the game. Again, the Patriots were a team that was pretty much out of it, being down 20-3 at that point, but it gave them life. And so in one breath, that's not what you want to see. In the other, the 49ers, unlike last week against the Rams, did not allow the Patriots opening of that door to come back and eventually bite them. So, look, the special teams is still a phase of the game that the Niners severely struggle in and need to shore up, need to button up. But fortunately, against an opponent like the Patriots, that's not going to kill them. The other thing that stood out to me early on in this game, and isn't something, again, that we can kind of push against an opponent like New England, but red zone inefficiency. The Niners had 2 straight drives going right down the field in which they did not cash in. They had a chance to put this game away earlier than they did. And while it took, a couple of plays in the second half, it was largely punts back and forth. The Patriots were not, in my opinion, a team that was going to be able to come back once they went down 17 or especially 20 points in the first half. But we also didn't think that the Los Angeles Rams were a team that could do that when the Niners went up 21-7 in the second half. So that's also something to keep an eye on, because last year the Niners were one of the most efficient teams in the red zone. This year so far, they have not been that same group. And so looking at another game in which, sure, they scored 30 points and another Purdy for 30. But if you look at what the Niners did, at least offensively in the red zone, not exactly where you want to see them. They were 50%. They were 7 for 13 on third down, but they also overall, didn't really have, I think, early on in the game, a right out of the gate mindset that was going to get them into the end zone as many times as they possibly could and put this game away. And maybe that's why they had to play a couple of their players a little bit later in this game that they liked. All right, as far as the individual that stood out to me from this game, I do want to get to them in a moment, but a reminder that this is the Believe in 49ers podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, sponsored by Bet Online AG. Again, my name is Evan Giddings. You can follow me on social media at Evan A. Giddings. Solo show, live from Levi's Stadium, live from the press box right after the Niners beat the Patriots 30-13. Mentioned Brock Purdy, and I want to dig into him a little bit more in a moment, but I think two players that stood out to me in this game. Number one, Brandon Ayuk had his first real, I would say, impact catch of the season. Was a diving ball on a 3rd and 9. They had to review it, but eventually confirm it. I thought that's the kind of play in which Brandon Ayuk, number one, needs to make, number two, has not made, but number three, can get him psychologically to where he can impact football games at a high level. I thought he had a deep crossing route over the middle. Thank you. Just getting a couple of pressers handed out to us right here. Press conference quotes, by the way, from the opposing side, because we were down listening to Kyle Shanahan along with Brock Purdy. And I have one story from the clubhouse from the locker room that I do want to get into in just a moment. But I think Brandon Ayuk is a player that has taken a long time to get to this point, longer than people would like. But right now at the 4-week mark, kind of the first quarter of the season being over, I do think we've begun to see him turn a corner and will ideally set up a great first half to the season, but a remaining 3 quarters of the season in which he can impact football games, because number one, the Niners need him to, but number two, this is where the schedule begins to get a little bit tougher. You look at the Arizonas, then the Seattle's on a short week, the Cowboys, the Chiefs. Those are teams with better secondaries than what we saw today from New England, and secondaries that are going to demand Brandon Ayuk to create separation. So the fact that he had a couple of nice catches in this game, a couple of impact plays more specifically, is hopefully going to be able to turn that psychological switch on for him when they start to play the bigger boys. The second player that stood out in this football game, even though he only played in the first half, it's and still continues to impress me, because I think that Fred Warner, look, he's always been a model of consistency. He has been out there for literally every single game in his NFL career. And the fact that he missed a half means that he and that ankle was a bit more banged up than expected. I do expect him to be back next week, because he looked like he was in good spirits. Typically, players that are out and have serious injury do not walk to the podium and do not speak to the media the way that Fred Warner did, with the confidence that he did. But the biggest takeaway I have from Fred Warner, he's the 49ers' most important player outside of quarterback. And yes, he's more important right now than the left tackle Trent Williams. He's more important, arguably, even than Christian McCaffrey, who is sidelined on IR. He's more important than Nick Bosa, who is the highest paid non-quarterback not named Justin Jefferson in the NFL. Fred Warner, what he has done through the first 4 weeks has not only kept the Niners, I think, afloat, but also mentally put them in a position to turn the corner and maintain a positive, winning, physical, just violent sometimes mindset that is where they have been. And I think the identity of who this defense has been over the last couple of years. Fred Warner didn't just have the pick six in this football game. And really the moment that stood out to me the most was even behind the scenes. I was in the locker room after the game, waiting for Brock Purdy to step to the podium, and was just kind of walking around, gathering some thoughts, talking to a couple players. And I overheard a conversation that Fred Warner was having with Nick Bosa, because Nick Bosa is a high-paid player. He might not be having the season that he himself has expected, though he did have a strip sack today and is now up to 3 on the season. But Fred was talking about last week against Los Angeles. He said, I only had 4 tackles. I felt like I played like dog bleep. I felt like I wasn't impacting football games, but I kept the same mindset that you, and he was speaking to Nick in this case, need to keep every single day, which is if you play with violence, if you play with physicality, if you play with intelligence, all 3 of those things combined are going to get you to where you need to go, because speaking of Nick Bosa, you are the most talented player that we have arguably on this football team. And in my opinion, that's the kind of leadership, the kind of mentorship that not many football teams have, especially ones that expect to contend for a Super Bowl like the 49ers. So, I mean, not just with his play on the field, the pick six, he's now got multiple, I think 3 total turnovers forced on the season, was the only reason the Niners were in the football game week 2 against the Vikings. But Fred Warner is the 49ers' most important player outside of quarterback, both because of what he does on the field, but also because of those things that he does off the field, being able to motivate the best of the best and extract the best out of them. So I thought that was just a very fortunate place that I could be as a fly on the wall for that conversation between Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. The 49ers are right now in a position where, looking ahead, we're talking about the Arizona Cardinals, and my partner, Tommy Call, and I will be with you later on this week. But just, I think the Niners have steadied the ship enough at this point, moving into week 5, to feel better about their position. Still not willing to go so as far as to say what their season could be, because they are a bit banged up. They lost Jordan Elliott in this game to a knee injury. Hopefully not going to be long-term. Fred Warner, an ankle injury, did not finish the game. George Kittle got hurt, but then returned to the game. There wasn't anything significant. Talanoa Hufanga probably would have played today, but the Niners decided to be a bit cautious with him, as I think they've decided to be with a few players that have been hurt. So overall, this team is getting healthier. They're moving in the right direction, and they're officially now a 500 football team. And I think it's all on the backs of their quarterback, their head coach, along with the presidential leader like Fred Warner. So overall, the Niners, a better get it kind of game as opposed to a get right game, but nonetheless, it is a win itself. 30-13, the final score between the San Francisco 49ers and the New England Patriots, as that brings us to a close on this special live edition podcast on the Believe in 49ers podcast, presented by the Believe Podcast Network and Bet Online AG. Evan Giddings, live from Levi Stadium here inside the press box after the Week 4 victory for the Niners, signing off, saying thank you for tapping in with us. Feel free to follow me on social media at Evan A. Giddings. Look forward to doing more of these. I'll be out here next week for the Arizona Cardinals game, covering every single game as I do for 95.7 The Game on our pregame show, the kickoff show, live on 95.7 The Game. So go ahead and check that out as well. I'll be here for every single game, doing pre and now doing post with you. If you want to ask me any questions, feel free to DM me. Feel free to reach out in our YouTube chat here live on the Believe YouTube channel. Just a lot of great content coming your way. So thank you very much for joining us. And again, one more time, thank you for tapping into this very special Sunday live edition of Believe in 49ers, live here on the Believe Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you very much.